Because let me tell you this, I'm going to give you a secret. The whole reason I'm doing this podcast, the whole reason that I'm doing this mind hacking happiness stuff in the first place, has to do with world peace. It is my goal that within the next 400 to 500 years, we attain world peace. And I know you're probably like, why don't you pick a bigger goal, dickhead? Don't set your sights too low. Don't underestimate your abilities. World fucking peace. But here's the thing. I know the practical path to world peace. I know the path to world peace because world peace is the point that we stop shooting guns and lobbing bombs over borders at each other to eliminate the bodies that hold the brains who have different ideas than we do about whatever, about religion, about monetary systems, about political structures, about who gets what natural resources, etc. All of that stuff is driven by a lack of inner peace. And I know that may seem a little counterintuitive, but even the Dalai Lama said there will be no world peace without inner peace. And he's completely correct. And here's why. If we don't devoid ourselves of the anger, of the fear, of the worry about the different ideas that exist on the other side of the border that could challenge our religion or our politics or our resource allocation or our monetary system or whatever it is, then we're going to continue to have war. But at the point that we do have that inner peace, where we are no longer controlled by those negative emotions that drive us into harming other people because we're afraid of ideas, then we have the courage to sit down at the negotiating table and figure out the differences in ideas and figure out the things that we need to do to work together so as not to have to kill each other to get to a common ground, or at least an agreement to disagree where we can all live together. But at the point that we have inner peace, and then we can teach tomorrow's children how to get beyond what has controlled us up until this point, where we move from humanity 2.0 into humanity 3.0 to be able to control our minds rather than be controlled by our minds, that is the moment of inner peace, at which point we will have world peace. So it becomes a question of world peace, develop inner peace. Okay, well, let's develop inner peace. Let's build a bridge to inner peace. And wow, turns out that there's some amazing tricks of neuroscience that turn off the stuff that creates the inner conflict, and science is informing us that it's correct, and we have the ability to take control of those knobs and dials and levers and pull them and turn them and push them and make our minds do what we want them to do, creating a higher level of inner peace. And once we get that to everybody, then we will eventually have world peace. That is my goal. And if you think that this is all crazy talk and there is no path to world peace and there's absolutely no path to inner peace, because there's no way you could devoid yourself of all the internal turmoil that has been causing your life to be less than it could be, then you need to understand how deep this rabbit hole goes. And you need to understand how much you need to learn about what you don't know. Stay tuned for how to take control of your mind for the first time in your life.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain.
When you die, on your deathbed, you will receive total consciousness.
I'm not trying to sell you on this idea in the sense of converting you to it. I want you to play with it. I want you to think of its possibilities. I'm not trying to prove it. I'm just putting it forward as a possibility of life to think about.
Welcome to Mind Hacking Happiness. Calm the fuck down and take your seats.
The only way to get rid of it is to accept it as it is right now.
Some people say a science of consciousness is impossible. I think that we may need one or two ideas that initially seem crazy before we can come to grips with consciousness.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Sean Webb, and this is the Mind Hacking Happiness Podcast, Episode 1. Now, I'm not new to podcasting. I did a podcast previously for 150 episodes that wound up in New and Notables and What's Hot on iTunes a number of times, but that was kind of a beta test for what we are about to present you here. We wanted to double check that the content that we were going to put out was going to be transformative for folks and helpful for folks, and it turned out to be amazingly so. And so we decided to, okay, we're going to take a step back. We're going to reorganize. We're going to put this stuff into some consumable bites that we can then represent to the audience at large. And, oh, by the way, I also needed to write a couple of books to get the foundation put together. And I needed to put out a good web page and some online courses and stuff like that. So they're all called Mind Hacking Happiness. Here's the red book right here, Mind Hacking Happiness Volume 1. But we needed to put out a podcast because there is ongoing content that can be a really amazing and really transformational for folks if we present it in a logical fashion, if we bring you good guests, and if we bring you good topics, things like that. This can be an ongoing thing. But one of the things that stopped me from putting out episode 1 and why this took such a long time to get put together was, Lao Tzu said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I wanted to make sure that that first step was in the right direction, because you don't want to start a journey of 1,000 miles with a step in the wrong way and you go, oh shit, I got to turn around and go the other way. So forever, I struggled with what is going to be the first topic? What is going to be the first subject that we talk about on this podcast that we hope has long legs and we feel will deliver some amazing content because of based on what we delivered previously and the feedback that we're getting with the books that we put out and stuff like that. What should be the first step? And a Navy SEAL friend of mine introduced me to a new podcast from a podcast that I hadn't heard about, from a host that I had not heard about previously. And his name was Jordan Harbinger. And if you have a chance to check out his Jordan Harbinger show, please do. It's amazing. And my Navy SEAL buddy made the right recommendation for me because I love people who talk about how to improve your life without having to change any of your external conditions, which you'll see a lot of our content is connected with. And that's what his show is all about. His show is all about bringing interesting people to talk about interesting topics, to talk about deeper level mind stuff that you may have not thought about previously, but that if you do think about, you can bring it into your awareness, make some changes, and improve your life without having to change any of your external conditions. And one of his shows recently, which hit home for me because it was something that I didn't even know about, something that I have struggled with, that I didn't even know how to name. That show was about the imposter syndrome. And I didn't even know what the imposter syndrome was, so let me explain that quickly to you. The imposter syndrome is that feeling that many of us have, supposedly 70% of us, have had this feeling at some point or another in our lives, where we look around ourselves and we say, I don't deserve what I have. Or the successes that I have achieved in my life, I don't have the credibility to have those successes. Or the people around me are soon going to wake up and figure out that I'm a big fraud and that I don't really know what I'm talking about and I don't really know what I'm doing. And this could be as a parent or as a professional executive or just any place in your workforce or, a place in your social structure, whatever it is, there's that feeling of, wow, I'm not really everything that people see me as, and I'm a big fake and I'm a big fraud. And that's what the imposter syndrome is all about, is that feeling that naturally arises in people. And this struck home to me because I remember a story about a group of freshman inductees to a major university, a very prestigious university. And someone got up on stage and asked the freshman class, thousands of people in the room, to say, asked them, who here in this room feels like they don't really deserve to be here? And 2/3 of the people in that auditorium raised their hand. And so, this was at a major university like a Harvard or a Stanford or a Princeton or something like that. I can't remember which school it was, but basically they told the story that 2/3 of the people in that room, in that moment, didn't believe that they deserved to be there. And so this is a prevalent thing that happens with a lot of us. But regarding me and this story of mind hacking happiness and where we came from, this has been a recurring theme for me. And so I thought, what better topic to talk about in episode 1 would be, let's set aside all the amazing things that mind hacking happiness is doing for people, because it is doing some amazing things. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's talk about how many times I almost quit because I didn't believe that I could be the guy to bring this stuff forward to anybody who's interested in hearing about it, because it almost happened multiple times and I almost quit multiple times because of this imposter syndrome of, I can't be this guy. I'm not this person. Everybody's going to see me as a fraud. And maybe this stuff has value, but I shouldn't be the person bringing it. Okay. And let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the value, because where we are today that we almost didn't get here is that Mind Hacking Happiness now has 2 books out, volume 1, volume 2, a little different focus on the 2. We have a website, we have online courses, and all of these things are proving super transformational for the folks who are digging into it. Because what it does, really, the functional purpose of Mind Hacking Happiness is to explain your mind to you in a way that you can then understand how all of it works, because it's the most complex tool in the universe, and you should have a manual for it, right? So you should know how it works so you can work it to your greatest benefit. But then it also explains how to grab some knobs and grab some control levers and twist some dials and things like that, and change the variables within your mind that your mind uses to then create your whole life. And I understand what you could be thinking at this point, which is, what's the big deal about a self-help program that can help raise levels of happiness in somebody's life? Those programs are a dime a dozen. No. That's not what this is. This is a program to help you understand your human mind to a point that you've never had access to before, so that you can control your human mind for the first time in your life and literally change how your mind works. And we didn't realize how transformative this program was until a Navy SEAL friend of mine came to me and said, I've been through the top-notch level training that the United States government and the United States intelligence services has to provide, and this program is night and day better over what the cutting-edge programs currently provide. That's how much better this is. And so when you start digging into this stuff and you start utilizing the things that Mind Hacking Happiness shows you about your own mind, it's almost like you can't unsee that stuff, and it becomes super useful. It's like almost like the phenomenon of when you look at the FedEx logo, and this is like marketing 101, you may have seen this before, but between the capital letter E and the lower letter X in the FedEx logo, the dead space in there is a big arrow pointing you in a direction that is psychologically, hey, we're taking your package somewhere, right? And so now at this point, if you've never seen that before, you'll never be able to look at the FedEx logo ever again and not see that arrow between the E and the X. It is something you could not unsee. And so this is the type of stuff that we do with your human mind. We show you things that you had missed previously, the big control knobs, the big control dials, the big push button on-off switches about your negative reactivity and things like that you can't unsee and that are then infinitely useful for you moving forward. This is the type of stuff that we do in explaining how your mind works for you, which you can then take control of it by default without any more words being said. But then, if you'd like, we'll say some more words and we'll help you, give you strategies and things like that you can help take control of your mind a little more effectively. And that stuff is majorly transformational. And I'm talking about stuff that people have struggled their whole lives to change. They're now able to change without effort. For instance, and I'll give you a couple of stories that'll deliver the gravitas of what almost didn't occur because of this imposter syndrome that I'd been struggling with. There was a lady in California named Karen, whose life was basically a mess, and anger had her so tightly wrapped around its finger that her life was horrible at the time. She came to see me for 5 hours before I wrote Mind Hacking Happiness. We went through how her mind worked. 2 weeks later, it clicked within her. And all of the things that were causing trouble in her life, in her mind, simply broke at that point. They literally broke and could no longer control her. And since this lady who was the self-described mega bitch and had all these issues in her life has now since become the Pleasanton Hugger in Pleasanton, California, who's out to the farmer's market every Saturday, rain or shine, for the last 4 years, handing out free hugs to anybody that wants a warm embrace for absolutely no reason on a Saturday morning. People are writing articles about her in the local newspaper. People are coming to see her on a regular basis because she is nothing but a warm, fluffy, flower-filled awesomeness of love that just stands there and gives away unconditional love every Saturday morning. She's so happy now, it annoys people. A friend, Julie, who is helping to put together a program for addiction now. She had struggled with addiction for years, read the Red Book, and this book is not about addiction, by the way. This book is about how your mind works and how to take control of your mind. Well, she read this. And after struggling with addiction for a number of years, and after landing herself in a neuroscience hospital, into the traumatic brain injury ward, where her neuroscientist quit because her brain had turned to mush because of the amount of alcohol that she was drinking on a regular basis, she lost function, physical function. She couldn't tie her shoes. She had minor problems with her speech, her balance. There was supposedly permanent brain damage because of this alcohol that she had been dumping into her system on a continuing basis. After months of rehabilitation, she had finally worked her way back to a higher level of functionality. Her husband came to take her home, drove her home. He's unpacking the bags in the driveway. She's inside pouring herself a glass of wine to take the edge off. It almost killed her, and she was going right back to it. She said, I know addiction. And after she read the Red Book, she then went on to not only kick alcohol by herself, she was able to get off the meds that the high-dollar rehab folks had put her on. She was able to stop the counseling that they had put her on because she ran out of things to say, and the counselor was like, yeah, you seem to have figured everything out. This is amazing. And ran out of things to say at counseling, ended counseling, and since she's been super happy in her life. And here's the thing about curing addiction. The AA folks will tell you, well, you're never really cured of addiction. You're an addict your whole life, and you never can go back to drinking. And because at that point, you're right into that same old pattern. That's bullshit. And Julie proved the story because she sat down just to test herself with a journal pad and a pen and mindfully drank a glass of wine. Decided that she didn't like the physical effect, that she didn't like the psychological effect, that she didn't like the after effect of the alcohol, and she made a decision that she was done with it. So she went back, took that drink that AA said you can never take, and said, yeah, I'm done. Because she was able to take control of her mind and change the things within her mind that were causing her addiction. Basically, she now understands that it was the underlying pain that she was trying to numb with the substance, regardless of what the substance is. And once you cure that pain, there is no more need for the substance to numb that pain. And she found that out. She took that approach of the Red Book, Mind Hacking Happiness, to a bunch of her friends in high-dollar rehab who are also struggling, cured them all. And now addiction is no longer a challenge for these folks. And the quotes out of these folks are, I've never been happier in all of my life. I got my mojo back from 15 years ago. I was able to, and other problems besides the addiction are now being solved in their life, where one lady had a problem with addiction, but she also had a problem with a non-committal relationship she was having. She was having issues with her kids. All of those things were alleviated because she was able to get in, twist the mess that was her mind back into shape, and cure a lot of the ailments that she was experiencing in her social life, in her emotional life. And one more quick example, because I know it's near and dear to some of your hearts, before we get back to the main topic. We're getting some stories now from some veterans who said they've read the Red Book and are reducing the symptoms of their PTSD because they're able to get into their mind and understand what's going on in there, alleviate some of the base concerns and the base issues that are then causing the complications over the top. And some of the stories there are just blowing me away. I mean, I'm not going to share any here because I don't have permission to share those yet. But hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future. That kind of stuff is just blowing me away. But let's get back to the topic at hand, because Jordan Harbinger brought forth for me the topic of understanding the imposter syndrome. And again, I was introduced to this podcast by a friend of mine who said, you got to check this guy out because he's doing nothing but wanting to improve people through, inner shining a light within their internal processes. And I was like, well, that's what I'm all about. So I want to check it out. And I ran into the episode about Imposter Complex. And Imposter Complex, again, is that thing where we don't feel like we deserve to be where we are. And I shouldn't be this guy, because to tell you the truth, this awesome stuff that's been going on with Mind Hacking Happiness the whole time, every step of the way, I've struggled with the imposter complex of I am not the guy that should be educating people on this. I don't have a PhD in back of my name, or any letters in back of my name for that matter. I'm not a recognized world-leading expert in these fields. At least I didn't used to be. I'm kind of starting to be pushed into that realm, especially in artificial emotional intelligence and being able to model the mind and human emotions for computers. But beyond being the guy who actually modeled empathy and compassion for computer systems so that hopefully AI won't eventually kill us one day, my thoughts were constantly along the lines of, I'm not a Dr. Phil. I'm not a Eckhart Tolle. I'm not a, Deepak Chopra or somebody like that understands all of this amazing, cool stuff that you can then use to improve your life. Like, who am I to be telling people how to improve their existence? When I may have a psychology 101 course under my belt some point in community college before I transferred to a major college. That's my extent of my education. How am I this person who has finished Aristotle's work in modeling emotions and in understanding our emotional turmoil to the point that we can then turn it off? How am I this person? And that started from day one. I had this epiphany about how the human mind worked and how my personal pain and suffering worked and how to turn it off. And wrote that in the Blue Book, by the way. If you want to read that story, that's fine. And I was like, okay, this is cool. This is a benefit to me. I started talking to other people about it, and all of a sudden they started telling me, well, that's how my stuff works too. And right away, the imposter complex reared its ugly head in me. And understand, I was a confident guy at this point. I had achieved the American dream. I was a really smart engineer in this very specific field of this supercomputer company that was the leading supercomputer company in the planet. And I was this young wunderkind type of guy who was doing amazing things at a young age. I was confident that I was on that leading edge of being able to do some really cool stuff. Right away, with this area of study, I can't be this guy. I can't be the guy who figured this stuff out. There's got to be something that I'm missing, right? There's got to be something that I haven't read yet that, somebody else has written about, or that somebody else figured out, or that somebody else has published. And so I'm not somebody who wants to waste time. So I went to one of the world's leading specialists in the field who'd spoken on the stage at TED about this very stuff, about mind modeling and emotions modeling and understanding human emotions and things like that. And I said, okay, let me explain to you this thing. What have I missed? What's the book that I need to read? Who's the world leading specialist that I need to talk to that has written all the papers that explain all this stuff? And, pat me on my ass on the way out the door, hand me my hat and say, nice try, kid. And she told me, and she's one of the people at the MIT Effective Computing Lab, whose job it is to review models of human mind and emotion so as to help build them for computers. One of the smartest people in the world. She said, no, actually, this may be the most elegant model for the cognitive catalysis of human emotion that I've ever seen. And no one's made this approach before. You need to publish this immediately because someone is going to steal it. And then she told me about all the politics and all of the infighting that happens in academia that I didn't even know about, where people will just upright steal your shit and claim it as theirs. And then she's like, then you're going to be arguing that this is your stuff when they have letters after their name. So who's going to win that fight? And so, I sent her, she asked for a white paper. I sent her the white paper up to MIT. And I also sent it to Georgia Tech and out to UCLA and a couple other institutions who were interested in this stuff as well. And it turned out that my model, the academics couldn't poke any holes in it, and that it was actually accurate to all of the neuroscience studies and all the emotion studies that have been done previously, and provided some new definitions of stuff that people are still arguing about today. Like, people are still, psychologists right now, you'll find a pair of psychologists sharing a cup of tea or a salad somewhere, arguing over the definition of anger and what makes anger, when I knocked it out almost a decade ago. And so, when we've got some new material from that, and I was like, I can't be the guy. And then all of a sudden I talked to this world leading specialist, says, you might be the guy. And so still from there, I was like, okay, maybe. And so then I started to do this other podcast that we had done 150 episodes on, and I started to explain the process of pain and suffering to folks to try to help them figure out how to turn their own stuff down, to see if we could get some responses. And it was just on a whim. It was just like, look, let's put out this previous podcast and see what happens. Put up a web page, see what happens. And it started to transform people's lives. And it started getting 4.7, 4.8 reviews out of 5 stars, and it was on New and Notables and What's Hot, and like pretty regularly, back when podcasts were still up and coming. And at the point that we got the feedback about the content being transformational, that's when I said, okay, I got to step back. And I got to really take this seriously. And the other thing that was happening at the time is that this theory that I'd put together, it was just basically a theory. After I'd sent it to MIT and UGA, or Georgia Tech and UCLA. And it was all theory. The science between 2007 to 2012 caught up in a big hurry. The science that wasn't done, that hadn't been done previously, was all of a sudden being knocked out. Like every 3 months, a major article was being written and published in a major publication that was proving every bit of this model in Mind-Hacking Happiness completely correct. There's not a portion of this previous theory. I guess we need to test the whole thing still, so it's probably still officially a theory. But there wasn't a portion of this that was incorrect. I'd nailed it. At least all the individual components. And so at that point, I was like, all right, well, now I can write a book that leads with the science, that starts with the studies, that starts with the stories of the people in the fMRI machine and watching their brain do this and that and yada, yada, yada. And so I did that. And that's what came out with Mind-Hacking Happiness. It was actually going to be one huge book, and then the editor was like, no, we're going to chop that sucker right down the middle. This seems to be a good spot, and we'll do a 2-volume set. We put the books out, led with the science, and I was still feeling that imposter syndrome. It was, I can't be this guy. I'm going to publish this book, and there's going to be somebody who steps out of those shadows and says, oh yeah, we've done this stuff decades ago, and here it is. And thanks for redesigning this in a less efficient way, in a stupider way, and yada, yada, yada. I was like, I can't be this guy. And that didn't happen. No one stepped out of the shadows, and no one was able to say that this stuff isn't original. And in fact, I got a chance to meet Eve Ekman, and if you know Paul Ekman, the name Paul, he's one of the gods of emotions studies in the history of psychology. He and his daughter Eve recently put out an atlas of emotions to explain emotions to the layperson and to group it into, and they followed the data. They followed all the studies and they correlated the data, and they put together this atlas of emotions that kind of explains the grouping, explains the severity levels and all this other stuff, the same exact stuff that I put in Mind-Hacking Happiness when I came at it from a different direction. So their stuff kind of validated what I had done in the Mind-Hacking Happiness book. And I still was, I can't be this guy. I can't, this is weird. This is too strange. But the feedback was what saved this process yet again. Because the feedback of, after putting the Mind-Hacking Happiness books out, the feedback of like Julie popping up and saying, hey, I cured my addiction with your book. Thank you, and let's put a program together for it. And I said, yeah, let's friggin' do that. That was amazing, because that's an intractable problem that people have been struggling with for hundreds and thousands of years, of not being able to control their mind's attraction to a substance to numb a pain that exists below their regular waking consciousness that they can't cure. All of a sudden, we're curing that with showing people how their mind works and giving them the opportunity to change the variables within their mind that their mind uses to create the pain in the first place. That's fucking blowing my mind. And now we're getting this feedback from these veterans who are saying, my PTSD is going away. And I almost committed suicide, or I tried to commit suicide. And I've come back from that because of what I've read in your book. I mean, that kind of stuff just blows me away. And so I wanted to talk to you about the imposter complex today because, because of the imposter complex, we might not have gotten here. I struggle with it, and that's fine. I think I'm getting okay with that because let me tell you this. I'm going to give you a secret. The whole reason I'm doing this podcast, the whole reason that I'm doing this mind hacking happiness stuff in the first place has to do with world peace. It is my goal that within the next 400 to 500 years, we attain world peace. And if we don't start on that goal now, we're never going to get there. And I know you're probably like, why don't you pick a bigger goal, dickhead? Don't set your sights too low. Don't underestimate your abilities. World fucking peace. But here's the thing. I know the practical path to world peace. I know the path to world peace because world peace is the point that we stop shooting guns and lobbing bombs over borders at each other to eliminate the bodies that hold the brains who have different ideas than we do about whatever, about religion, about monetary systems, about political structures, about who gets what natural resources, etc. All of that stuff is driven by a lack of inner peace. And I know that may seem a little counterintuitive, but even the Dalai Lama said there will be no world peace without inner peace. And he's completely correct. And here's why. If we don't devoid ourselves of the anger, of the fear, of the worry about the different ideas that exist on the other side of the border that could challenge our religion or our politics or our resource allocation or our monetary system or whatever it is, then we're going to continue to have war. But at the point that we do have that inner peace, where we are no longer controlled by those negative emotions that drive us into harming other people because we're afraid of ideas, then we have the courage to sit down at the negotiating table and figure out the differences in ideas and figure out the things that we need to do to work together so as not to have to kill each other to get to a common ground or at least an agreement to disagree where we can all live together. But at the point that we have inner peace, and then we can teach tomorrow's children how to get beyond what has controlled us up until this point, where we move from humanity 2.0 into humanity 3.0 to be able to control our minds rather than be controlled by our minds, that is the moment of inner peace, at which point we will have world peace. So it becomes a question of world peace, develop inner peace. Okay, well, let's develop inner peace. Let's build a bridge to inner peace. And wow, turns out that there's some amazing tricks of neuroscience that turn off the stuff that creates the inner conflict, and science is informing us that it's correct, and we have the ability to take control of those knobs and dials and levers and pull them and turn them and push them and make our minds do what we want them to do, creating a higher level of inner peace. And once we get that to everybody, then we will eventually have world peace. That is my goal. If I can help you along the way to attain your inner peace, great. I will bring you guests. I will bring you topics. I will bring you science. I will bring you philosophical discussion, and I will bring you mind musings of a crazed madman sitting in this chair who has really weird opinions about things. I will bring that all to you and lay it all out there, but I need your help. I need your help, and that's why I wanted to talk about the imposter syndrome this first episode, because it's not a one-man show. You got to tell me what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you can be motivated to share to other folks to help this grow so that we can get it to more people, what you're uncomfortable in sharing so that I don't stifle the growth of this stuff. Because guess what? This isn't for my enrichment. This isn't, me wanting to get a private jet and all this other bullshit. This is me wanting to get people the basic fundamental tools that they need to take control of their mind, to make their life awesome, to make their lives of the people around them awesome as a result, because they're no longer an asshole. And all of a sudden, this divisiveness that is spreading across our country and our world stops and starts reversing and going the other way. And we start to be a little more inclusive. We start to be a little more forgiving. We start to be a little more understanding of our own internal shit that arises. That's my passion. Let's spread that. Call everybody in your phone. Email everybody in your email contact list. Spread this to absolutely everybody because, you know, it's a math thing at that point. The certain minority of folks who actually take a look at something, their lives are going to be better. And we're going to move the happiness meter for the planet just a little bit. And that's what this whole show is going to be about from here moving forward. I hope this finds you well. No commercials this show. I will have affiliate partnerships that I would want you to check out and that will be beneficial for you to check out, such as Muse Headband. There are links on my website that you can check that out. Zen Tent Float Tank. I have a Zen float tank at my house. It's really friggin' cool to be able to float in salt water, lukewarm, to clear my head and to dive into deep intelligence and deep consciousness. That's amazing. Some cordyceps mushroom pills from Onnit, Alpha Brain, and of course Audible. If you want to grab the books that I've been talking about this last, how long? 37 minutes. You can get these from a link for free from Audible. If you don't already have a membership, just come to mindhackinghappiness.com/free book, and you'll be able to land at Audible and get my books for free if you sign up for the 30-day trial. And if you want to cancel, you get to keep the book. So I read it myself. I'm told I do a really good job. Check that out. I did it for you. Again, I hope this message finds you well. We'll have a different format this next upcoming episode, which will leave TBD so that we can get the technical issues and stuff taken care of on setting up the podcast feed, the RSS feed, etc. And I do want to have a really cool guest for you. Hope things are well. Talk to you soon. Peace.